Hello and welcome to the video. In this video we're going to talk about the frequencies and bands and how the Connex Prosight system uses the available frequencies to get the HD video down to the receiver. Now it can be a little bit confusing because not only do they have three different ways that you can configure it up depending on where you are and how you want to use the system, but it's also slightly different in that there is an EU version of this and a non-EU version of this as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of that as we go through this. So in this video, first of all, we'll talk about the modes that you'll find when you go into the settings for each of these receivers. Here in front of me, I have an American receiver, a non-EU version, which you can see at the back, it just has an FC mark. If I turn the other one over, then you'll see that this one has a CE mark on the back. This is the European version. Now I need to say a very big thank you to the guys at Amazon who create the Connex Prosight system, who've been very kind and generous with their time to help make sure that I have this absolutely straight and right as of the end of July when I'm making this video, because the way this works has changed a little bit very recently, due mainly to the fact that we have a new camera in the Connex Prosight system. So let's first of all talk about the different bands that you're going to find when you go into the application. Now, just as a quick recap, the application is available for iOS and Android. You can go into the various stores and search for the Prosite. Once you've found the Connex application and installed it, then you can connect to the Connex system using Bluetooth. The default password is 60000000 will get you connected. Once you're connected, you can look around and set everything up. So let's have a look at how Prosight uses the frequencies. And when you look in those menus, you will find that there are three different ways that you can actually set up the system. The first, which is the default for most of them, is going to be something called automatic mode. Now what happens in automatic mode is the available frequencies, depending on where you live in the world, can range from anything from down to 5.1 up to about 5.9 gigahertz. So a much broader set of frequencies than are available to standard FPV. Not all of those are available in all countries, and not all of those are available unless you have the ham license set up on your Prosite as well. But a little bit more about that in a second. The way this automatic works is it powers up and very quickly it scans and has a look at all the frequencies that are available in the local area that you're flying. It then picks the best option and then also will frequency hop in the event of a data link problem. It'll immediately jump to another frequency, and that's the one by default that you're going to be on. The next one is fixed mode. This is where you actually get to choose the kind of frequency that you want. Now it uses locally allowed frequencies, again in the 5.1 to the 5.9 gigahertz band, but this time you choose the one that you want. And there are a couple of options here. They're actually the individual frequencies themselves, and you can kind of scroll through and pick one. There are also the race band option that allows you to pick one of the analog race bands to use as part of a flight. So say for example you go to a flying field, and out of the 6 race band frequencies that are in use on that day, you happen to turn up and you're using Connex system to fly your FPV race. If you're given race band 3, then in fixed mode you can absolutely pick race band 3 and it will use that core frequency to send and receive information on. When you turn on something like fixed mode, it won't do hopping, and the reason it won't do hopping if the link gets a little bit dodgy is because it doesn't want to hop into another one of the bands where someone else is trying to fly or potentially cause a conflict with another pilot. The last thing that you'll see when you go to set up the frequencies is something called the Prosite bands. Again, using locally allowed frequencies between 5.1 and 5.9 gigahertz. Notionally they're called A to H, but you might have a subset of that, particularly if you're here in the EU or if you're in America and you're not using one of the settings. And each band has a couple of frequencies that are used, so it has a primary band and also a secondary band as well that it can switch to in the event of a little bit of a problem. Now until recently this has been a little bit of a black art, because what you've had to do is go around and try and figure out which is the best choice for you at any particular event. Now if you're going to be racing and everyone else is on other race bands, then that gets a little bit easier with that fixed mode. But how do you know which is the best Prosight band? How do you know if automatic mode is going to be fine in the area that you're flying in? Let's look at how the bands actually match up. So here along the bottom of this axis is the bands that are available, the 5.1 all the way up to 5.9, just over 5.9 actually. The traditional 40 analog FPV bands, and again, not all of those 40 bands are available in each country. Some of them wander outside the frequencies that you're available to use, but they notionally go from about 5.64, 5.65 up to just over 5.9 gigahertz. So if you go into the application and connect to a European receiver and look at the modes that you can choose from, you'll find that there is two. The first one is called indoor mode. That will set the transmission power for the VTX on the model to 200 milliwatts power. And you have one called SRD, which is 25 milliwatts power. So SRD is definitely the one you need to be using outdoors if you want to remain compliant and legal. The USA Connex equipment has a little bit of a different setup. There are two modes, both of them are still 200 milliwatts, but in this case, one of them's called FCC and the other one's called ham. If you select the ham, I'm guessing it's referring to the amateur radio licenses that people have, then if you choose ham, you get more frequencies, particularly down in the lower ranges. So that's the difference there in non-EU countries. The other thing that's worthwhile talking around on this slide is there is the new camera available from Connex as well. This is called the HX camera. I'll link here to the video where we talk about the HX camera and have done some additional testing. It gives you full 720p at 60 frames a second. So it's actually better than all the other modes combined on the other camera. But we'll look at that in another video. But what that does mean is it uses a slightly wider set of frequencies around the core frequency that you're selecting to get higher amount of HD data down so it can support 720p 60 frames a second. So on the left hand side, let's assume that we picked a frequency between 5.1 and 5.2. Realistically, to be able to choose something down there, you're definitely going to be on a non-EU transmitter and receiver setup. The way it works is that around the core frequency, there's actually 13 megahertz needed for that original camera. So it's not just one standard frequency it's using a set of frequencies around that center frequency to get all the data down to the receiver. However, because the HX camera is doing a full frame every time at 60 frames a second, it needs a little bit more bandwidth or more frequencies to get the data down in a timely manner. So actually this time it's about 25 megahertz needed around the core frequencies. So whatever the core frequency is, 12.5 megahertz down and 12.5 megahertz up is what the camera actually needs. And again, the firmware takes care of all of that, but you do have to be using the very latest and greatest version of the firmware for that to work. So if you're anything like me, by this point in the chat, you're thinking that's fine, but how the heck do I choose the best one then? There's so much to think about, there's so many options. Which one is going to be my best band or setting for my Prosight system? Well, that has just changed as of the end of July, beginning of August. They've brought out version 5.4.12. It might be 5.4.13 by the time it actually comes out, but you need to update your receiver and your transmitter on your Connex Prosight system to that version or later, and you have a fantastic new feature which makes this so much easier, and that is the frequency histogram. Now, if you connect up to your equipment using the Bluetooth setting like we showed in the other videos, and it comes up and at the top of the application it tells you that there's a firmware update, then I'd heartily recommend going and connecting and updating, because it will give you this extra feature. And the way it works is that in the menu itself, you can actually choose the spectrum analyzer as part of the menu settings. And then the spectrum analyzer will start. It'll flip it from portrait into landscape mode on the Android or the Apple device that you're using, and it will show you in a live way what it can actually see in each of the bands and frequencies available in the 5.1 to the 5.9 spectrum that it can use. Small bars mean that there is no signal can be heard on that particular frequency that you can choose, and anything with a grey bar is showing you a frequency that is unavailable in your territory with the setup that you have. Red shows the frequencies that you can choose, and if you have a deep red or a deep grey bar, then that's actually showing you that somebody in close proximity is already transmitting a valid Prosite HD signal on that channel. So if you zoom in by pinching on the spectrum itself down to that particular channel that's showing as a dark red or dark grey, when you get zoomed in, it'll actually show you the name of the transmitter that's being used as well, and that allows you, if you want to watch in a spectator mode, if you're at an event, you can just kind of zoom in and you can watch that stream live in your receiver. The really cool thing though is as you pinch in on those little red bars that have no signal on them, that are good choices for you to fly with, as you get down to the very lowest level, there's the option to click connect. And when you click connect, that configures the radio receiver and the radio transmitter up on the model to use that frequency automatically. And as you scroll through, you'll see all the Prosite bands listed, you'll see all the different frequencies. It makes it really, really simple and straightforward to set up the Prosite system to work well in whatever location you have. So hopefully that helps those of you that are interested in this, and this is something that was a bit complicated. It has changed a bit, and some of the information out there is getting a little bit out of date, particularly with the brand new firmwares that have just come out as I'm recording this video. So in summary, I'd recommend you use version 5.4.12 or later of the firmware on both the Connex on your airside and the ground side unit. That will give you access to the spectrum analyzer, and then use the spectrum analyzer whenever you go to the field and you're about to fly to pick a really nice quiet part of the spectrum that you're allowed to use for your Connex equipment. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video, and particularly for watching right to the very end. We try and release a video on Tuesday and Friday, and sometimes we'll release 1 or 2 extra ones in a week as well. All of the videos on the channel are organised into easy to use playlists, so do have a look in there, because if you're interested in a subject, we organise all the videos on that subject so you can find them easily all together in one place. If you like what we're doing, then please like and subscribe and tell others about the channel so they can come and join as well. We're available in all of the usual social media places, particularly in places like Instagram, Twitter, and we also share all of our 3D designs on Thingiverse.